All right, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover the absolute mastermind behind both the physical and spiritual worlds of ancient Egypt. When we think of Egyptian gods, we almost always picture these wild figures with animal heads, right? Like Anubis the jackal or Horus the falcon. But the deity we're looking at today, completely different. He's an architect, a craftsman, and honestly, quite possibly one of the most sophisticated thinkers in all of ancient mythology. His name is Ptah. But before we even get into his mythology, I want you to think about something. Next time you say the word Egypt, consider this question. Where does that word actually come from? Because it's not named after a famous pharaoh or the Nile River or any geographical feature. Which brings us to part 1, the god who named Egypt and the origins of a name.
Consider this ancient term, Hut-ka-Ptah. In the ancient Egyptian language, this translates perfectly to the enclosure of the Ka of Ptah. Now, the Ka was essentially the vital spark or the soul. And this wasn't just some poetic phrase. It was the actual literal name for the great temple of the god Ptah located in the ancient capital city of Memphis. Now, here is where history plays a really fascinating game of telephone. This term, Hut-ka-Ptah, traveled over to the Greeks where it was pronounced as Egyptos. From there, it shifted into Latin as Aegyptus, filtered its way through Middle French as Egypte, and eventually became the English word we use today, Egypt. So the craziest part about all this, whenever you say the name of this country, you are quite literally speaking the name of Ptah's ancient temple.
Let's move on to section 2, creation by heart and tongue, and explore Ptah's intellectual origins. Seeing how Ptah fits into the naming of Egypt builds right into an understanding of how he actually created the universe. And it brilliantly illustrates just how sophisticated the Memphite theology was compared to other ancient physical creation myths. Think about it. If you look at your standard creation stories from antiquity, they are almost always highly physical. A god molds humans out of clay, maybe battles a giant sea monster to form the sky, or sheds bodily fluids to create the rivers. It's messy. But compare that to Ptah's intellectual method. His approach was totally different. He conceived the world through thought and brought it into physical existence just through speech. To really wrap our heads around this, we have this absolutely remarkable primary source called the Shabaka stone from the 25th dynasty. It states that Ptah gave life to all the gods and their Kas as well through this heart and this tongue. You see, in ancient Egyptian anatomy, the heart was actually the seat of thought and intelligence, not just emotion like we think of it today. And the tongue, that was the tool of command. He thought it, he spoke it, and boom, so it was. Scholars actually find this incredibly fascinating because it closely mirrors later Jewish and Christian concepts of the divine word, the whole idea of creating reality through speech alone. And we see this echoed even earlier in history. Just look at this quote from a hymn to Ptah dating way back to the 22nd dynasty. It declares that he crafted the world in the design of his heart. He wasn't some manual laborer hauling around cosmic dirt. This earlier hymn reinforces that Ptah was the ultimate intellectual architect of existence. It's a remarkably abstract, almost modern way of looking at creation, focusing completely on structural design rather than brute force. So, what does a god like this actually look like? Let's get into section 3, decoding the divine symbols. What's really interesting here is how we can visually decode Ptah's unique look. Ptah is almost always depicted as a man with striking green skin, wrapped up tight in a shroud that sticks closely to his body, and wearing this straight, divine, false beard. The green skin is a dead giveaway for fertility and rebirth, while that tight shroud kind of gives him the appearance of a mummy, deeply connecting him to the earth. But unlike your typical mummy, he is literally pulsating with life and creative potential. But honestly, the most crucial visual anchor for Ptah is the incredibly powerful staff he always holds in his hands. You'll notice right away it's not a standard spear or just a simple walking stick. It's actually a combination. He combines 3 absolute forces, power, life, and stability into one unified tool of creation. Let's break down this scepter. First up, we have the Wast scepter, which represents sheer divine power and dominion. Woven right into that is the Ankh, the famous looped cross you've probably seen that stands for life itself. And finally, the Djed pillar, which represents stability and endurance. By holding all 3 of these simultaneously, Ptah is demonstrating that he doesn't just create life out of nowhere. He empowers it and he gives it a rock-solid, stable foundation. Which leads us perfectly into section 4, the many faces of Ptah. He was very much a shape-shifting god. You see, as an architect of society, Ptah wasn't just some static figure sitting on a throne. he shape-shifted to serve a ton of different needs. Down in the necropolis of Saqqara, he merged with local gods to become Ptah Sokar Osiris, often appearing as a mummified falcon, acting as the ultimate protector of the dead. But, say you were a blacksmith. You revered him as Tatanen, a vigorous young man representing underground fire, who was equally feared for causing rumbling earthquakes. He even had a living, breathing avatar, the Apis bull. This sacred bull was considered the literal herald of the sun god Re and was buried with massive, massive honors. So the crucial takeaway here is how incredibly adaptable he was across daily Egyptian life. He was absolutely everywhere. And his influence didn't stop at the borders of the Nile either. No, Ptah went international. He was sometimes represented as a naked, deformed dwarf, closely associated with the protector god Bes. This highly portable little form of Ptah was exported all throughout the eastern Mediterranean. His influence even crossed the sea, showing up in places like Carthage, largely thanks to the trading networks of the Phoenicians. But I've got to say, perhaps one of the absolute most endearing details about Ptah is this specific title, the god who listens to prayers. Because he was the patron of architects and craftsmen, the everyday workers felt a really special, direct connection to him. At the workers' village of Deir el-Medina and over at his main temple in Memphis, massive ears were carved straight into the sanctuary walls. I mean, they literally carved giant ears into the stone. And they did this so that ordinary craftsmen and builders knew their patron god was directly listening to their everyday struggles and requests. It's just a beautiful concept. Now, let's look at Section 5, the legacy of the great builder and his enduring shadow. Ptah's cultural shadow extends thousands of years, way past the fall of ancient Egypt. In the realm of high art, for example, he is immortalized in Giuseppe Verdi's insanely famous opera Aida. Set in ancient Egypt, the opera features these massive, dramatic, soaring choruses invoking the god, crying out Pulsente Ptah, which means O mighty Ptah, and Immenso Ptah. Even today, he remains the ultimate symbol of Egyptian majesty in Western popular culture. And his legacy quite literally reaches into outer space. This number, 5011, isn't just random. 5011 Ptah is the official designation of an asteroid discovered and permanently named in his honor. So he's gone from the deep underground fires of the Earth all the way up to the stars above. That is quite the resume. Which leaves us with a final, really provocative thought to ponder today. How does the ancient concept of creation through thought and speech still shape the way we understand power and existence today? Think about it. We live in an era where words, code, and communication literally build the digital and physical worlds that we inhabit. Ptah's method of creating through the heart and tongue feels remarkably relevant right this second. Words have power. They shape our reality. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and next time you use your voice to bring a brand new idea to life, just remember the ancient architect who started it all.